Welcome to the Flore Fantasy and Sci-Fi Lore. Today we are still in the world of Fallout. We are talking about power armor. We're going to talk about the creation of the fusion cores and how that led to the Sino-American War. We'll talk about the first power suits of armor, some of the defects and problems with them, and how that led to the abandonment of the Chinese invasion. We will talk about Chinese power armor and how that influenced the development of weapons technology in the United States. And we will talk about the most common suits of power armor there are to find, an advancement in power armor that comes after the Great War. If that is what you're looking for, this is the episode for you. Roll the intro.
Do you remember the first story that was so spellbinding it drove you to break the rules and stay up all night to keep reading, keep watching, keep playing? So good, you forgot your life and lived there?
So good, the moment it ended, you asked yourself, what next?
Welcome to the Flore. Our goal is to take you back, take you deeper, to explore and understand more, and relive that childlike wonder.
Join us as we dive deep into humanity's greatest stories, no matter how they are told, through books, movies, television, even games.
One of us does an in-depth research on the topic. One of us is familiar with the topic.
And one of us knows nothing. So the right questions will always be asked and addressed for anyone coming into the topic, regardless of how much you know.
Enjoy another world, another adventure, another spellbinding story. Join us on the Flore. Welcome to another Fallout edition of the Flore. We are doing not a creature feature, a technology feature, I guess. We're going to be talking about power armor. The Ghouls episode is coming. We have not forgotten your questions. But for now, we are diving into power armor because a lot of people have been asking about this as well. So, we're going to go, because this is the Flore. We like to go deep. So we're actually going to go all the way back to World War I and World War II. We're going to talk about Panzer armor, right? So this was essentially plate mail still being used in World War I and II. It was very thick, heavy layered plates that was worn by usually machine gunners, sometimes a Gatling gunner, in a nest. And essentially they needed to be in a nest because it was so heavy they couldn't really move around at all. But it changed them just from, not only were they deadly offense, but they had a really heavy defense, right? You basically had to land a shot in the face because they were wearing, the thick helmets to either ricochet or resist bullets. They had the heavy armor on. There were plates on the side of the aiming features on these guns. They were very protected and very hard to take down because of that, right? And so we have seen this kind of heavy plate armor in warfare since forever, right? Since, cavemen putting on, flat pieces of wood on their chest and charging into combat, right? So, power armor seems like a deviation, but that's only because there's this window of time where we stop using Panzer armor because we develop armor-piercing bullets. We move into bulletproof vests, and then Fallout moves into power armor. And so if you grow up in that age without plated armor, it feels like this whole other thing. But if you look at the whole history of warfare, plated armor is very common. It's something we have been doing for a very long time.
I remember there's another group of guys that they would do that thick plated armor, but they were to clear trenches. They wear this thick plated armor equipped with nothing but grenades and shotguns.
Jeez.
They would charge in and they wouldn't go down and, be chucking grenades around. But the shotguns also had a feature where you could just hold the trigger and every time you cocked it, it would fire.
Right?
So they could just rapid fire into these trenches and just sweep them. During this wartime, the people getting swept by it were like, that should be a war crime. Like, you shouldn't be.
That should be a war crime. So, and I imagine that's kind of where, like, the combat shotgun evolves out of that, right? We want people with multiple rounds and a shotgun. So the power armor was designed as heavy infantry armor designed for two things: combat and heavy labor. So, I mean, as far back as the Romans, soldiers are more builders than they are soldiers, right? A typical Roman soldier spent far more time building than they would ever spend in combat. And that's kind of true of most soldiers, right? Like you move, you build a defense, and then you hold it, you're right. And you're constantly building trenches, you're building barricades, all kinds of things like that. And so they did need these heavy armor to just not just charge into combat, but also to help with the building, because that is how they spend the majority of their time, and they want to be able to move larger, heavier objects with these soldiers, which is one of the big changes from a tank to power armor, right? Tank and power armor can both charge the field. Power armor can build the defenses. The tank cannot.
You can roll the boulders and move the logs.
Yeah. So that was a big difference. So in Fallout, the very first time we will encounter power armor is at the Lost Hills bunker. This is the very first base of the Brotherhood of Steel. Outside, we will encounter 2 guards on duty, and one of them will tell us that he's wearing T-51B power armor. Now, T-51B has 2 references. He's saying that here, but most of the time when you say T-51B, you're actually referring to a winterized power armor designed for the war in Alaska. Likely he is not wearing that. More likely he's wearing a hardened steel piece of armor, and we'll go into that. So, power armor was originally created by West Tech. This development starts during the resource wars. Due to the shortage of oil, the U.S. government wanted these powered suits to be able to essentially take a tank into a building, right? When we're attacking our enemy, we need to have the tanks go inside without destroying the buildings, because one of the things we wanted was to retake the Alaskan oil wells, right? And you just
destroy it all.
You don't want to destroy those oil drills because you need them to mine oil, right? So they wanted these tanks going inside. And this had been a project, on the books for a while, but as, more and more demand comes from it, it gets more funding. But one of the big things that comes up in the development of power armor is that it cannot use oil. There was a massive shortage going on. We're in the midst of the resource wars. This thing cannot run on oil, which led to a heavy investment into the development of fusion cores. And when the West Tech is finally able to develop the fusion core needed to run the power armor, they announce it to the world. We've developed this new form of energy. It's awesome and amazing. China requests access. They're like, hey, can we get some oil, or can we get the schematics to fusion cores? We are suffering in an energy crisis here. And the U.S. says no, and China invades Alaska to take the oil. Right? That is what kicks that off. Yeah, they're like, we need, you now have oil in Alaska and fusion cores, share. And we're like, no. And they're like, fine, we take. Right? And they are successful, right? They take Alaska. And that is a war front for quite some time. And it is not until the first round of power armor is complete that we retake Alaska, or at least part of it. So that's in 2066 that we announced the fusion cores, and they then invade Alaska. So in 2067, a year later, the T-55 unit, T-45. So I'm assuming this is just each iteration. And so it's at Unit 45, we're like, this is at least somewhat combat ready. You can now use it. So the T-45s are released to the U.S. military, and they are used to join the war in Alaska. And for the most part, that is the American victory. Now, there will still be the Battle of Anchorage that will take place much later, but that leads to a huge victory in Alaska. Now, encountering the power armor, the Chinese quickly begin development of their own power armor to counter this. And the U.S. military recognizes that the power armor has a profound weakness, and that is electrical energy attacks. And because they are afraid of China developing their power armor, and they're aware of the weakness in their own power armor, the U.S. begins developing pulse guns. So the U.S. Air Force and the Yuma Flats Energy Consortium both create pulse guns in preparation for Chinese power armor. So the next version of power armor we see is called the MP. This is Medical Power Armor 47A. It's a prototype that can inject MEDX into the user. In later versions of power armor, this will become a default feature. But this is where it was introduced at. So the next big development in power armor by Westech is the power armor frame. This is a universal frame that would allow various parts of all power armor models to be swapped out according to need and availability. It would also make salvaging of damaged suits far more effective, and that would keep more suits in use in the combat situations, right? So this was a big thing. Now, as a player, you won't see this until Fallout 4, right? In Fallout 4, you have this frame, like the first time you get it, it's missing several pieces of the power armor, but you can still drive it around with the frame and you can use it to lift heavy weaponry, right? Mm-hmm. But according to the lore, this happens before the war that they developed the frame. And, it's a really big deal. If you've got a guy who gets, his arm blown off with a missile launcher, he dies in the suit, you can now take plates and whatnot from other power armor and reconstruct that arm and send that suit back into combat, right?
It's not just out of commission.
Yeah, it's not just a scrap heap now. So the U.S. then invades mainland China. At this point, they are still heavily dependent on the T-45, and the T-45 is burning through power cores at an alarming rate, and the invasion cannot be sustained, right? So in the later versions of power armor, a single fusion core is designed to last a power armor 100 years with moderate use, right? The T-45 are burning through power cores in less than a year, and they're just like, we cannot sustain this amount of fusion cores. You just can't burn through them that fast. They take a lot to make, and we don't have a lot of energy. We just finished a resource war. Well, I guess we're in the middle of one, right? At that time, the T-51 was being tested at Fort Strong in Massachusetts. A big issue they were encountering is they wanted to be able to drop soldiers from high altitude into combat situations, or to be able to have them move through civilian areas, including dropping down from buildings. So the T-45, you could drop in from about 100 feet. Later models, it was up to about 300. At this time, the T-51, dropping down from the higher altitudes, they were just toppling over. And eventually they figured out a better stabilizing gyroscope that would let them stay upright when they would drop down from higher altitudes. So that was the T-51. And you'll encounter that suit, of course, in Fallout 4, as that was in Massachusetts. So the T-51 had to be adapted for the cold temperatures of Alaska. The Chinese were constantly trying to retake the oil fields there because they needed the oil. And so some of the protection was stripped out of the T-51, reducing in-game that reduces the damage protection from 50 to 40. So this is now the T-51B. And then they were winterized, right? There's extra warmth and warming systems added to the power armor. It's given snow camouflage. And this then becomes the T-51B, and that is what is used to win the Battle of Anchorage, right? Which is kind of the definitive victory in the Sino-American War. And very shortly after, we get the Great War. Right. So the T-51 and the T-51B are the two suits that really are the last big suits released into combat, but other suits were in development when we have the Great War. Before the Great War, but after the Battle of Anchorage, Westech announces that the T-60 is ready to go in and become the latest version. However, the Great War happens very shortly after that. So you won't encounter a lot of T-60s out in the world, but the Brotherhood of Steel has found a few manufacturing plants and storage facilities that have had a lot of T-60 in it. So you will see a lot of T-60 on the Brotherhood. Okay. So, anywhere from the T-45 to the T-60, usually that's what you're going to encounter in the Wasteland. There is a T-65 model that can be found in Vault 69. So the Secret Service had that version. For the most part, T-65s must be created from schematics. Okay, so we have been mentioning at the end of our episodes recently about the treasure room, how, as Aaron likes to describe it, in the floor we go deep into things, but in the treasure room we kind of go wide. And we wanted to give people who have never been in the treasure room a little bit of a sample. So going forward, we'll probably be putting in little bits and pieces here. So here is a small clip from the treasure room. We hope you enjoy it and are interested in learning more in there. With Mark being stealth, we can kind of look at like the skills of Fallout and be like, maybe we can pick some of the other ones and be like, what if Mark had been made to represent Bard, right? The immortal barter, wander in the waste, trading all kinds of weird gizmos and gadgets, right? As opposed to the mysterious stranger showing up and helping you battle. The mysterious stranger shows up with a little shop and be like, you want to buy some more crazy stuff? It does crazy stuff.
Maybe it'd be a bit like the cursed antique shop.
Oh,
Like these items that he's like, you really want this, but surprise.
Surprise. Like, yeah, I know how shops work. You pay money. They're like, well, no, it's a price you don't always see. Like, I know how tax works. I've paid tax before. It's not included in the price. And no, you don't understand. They're cursed. They're cursed.
Yeah. I think that would be a fun way to do that.
Oh, that would be interesting. See, my thought was like you would just hope to encounter him and be like, sells the best stuff in the game. I would say maybe even he doesn't take caps. You've got to trade stuff. And it's almost like a crafting. Like he wants specific things, right?
Yeah.
This and this and this. And be like, just random stuff you wouldn't even want in the wasteland. Be like, why do you want this crap? Be like, because I don't have it. When you've been around this long, I've got the nice stuff. I want the weird stuff. It's entertaining for me to have weird, and it's entertaining for me to watch you trying to figure out how to get weird.
Yeah.
Another piece of power armor that was in development was the XO-1. It will later be referred to as advanced power armor, just superior in every way. However, they were having all kinds of problems with energy and overheating and lots of that while it was in development. And they were still struggling with these problems when the bombs drop. So
this is the Enclave's armor?
Yes. So the schematics for the XO-1 exist within Fallout. However, there were no finished suits, largely because they still had problems with it. The Enclave will get their hands on the XO-1 plans, and they will eventually find ways to solve the problems it was having, and they will create advanced power armor. So yes, this is the Enclave's armor. Later on, they will then upgrade that to Mark II advanced power armor, which is just lighter weight. They've reduced the weight of the frame by switching to a different kind of composite ceramic, which just reduces the weight on the system and everything, and the heating, and less drain on the power core.
Okay.
So all in all, just an improvement by reducing the weight. So that begins. So in 2198 is when the Enclave gets the plans for the XO-1. They work on the project until 2220. So 22 years. I know that's like a lot of twos going on there. It could have been a twos, yes. Is when they finally bring the project to light. And then when they relocate to the East Coast, they will eventually take the X1 plans, advanced power armor, and move it into the final version, which is the Hellfire power armor. So the Enclave are really the only people developing power armor post Great War, right? They're the ones who develop advanced power armor. They move it into Mach 2. Like, the most the Brotherhood ever does is develop a chemical process to harden the steel plates of the power armor. That is the most the Brotherhood ever does. During the age of the NCR, the Brotherhood is manufacturing power armor, but it is not any kind of advanced form the way the Enclave does. Like, the Enclave doesn't just make power armor, they advance the technology and manufacture that. So we don't see the Brotherhood doing that. The suits themselves, originally made from a polylaminate composite. The exception is, of course, the Advanced Power Armor Mark II and the the EXC Power Armor, which is made from black titanium, and we will go into that suit in a minute. So mostly we've got that polylaminate composite. They can recycle waste to produce water, kind of like still suits from Dune. This allows people to go through for weeks in the waste without water. Hydraulic systems are what enhance the strength. You see that tubing on the outside, and in the advanced power armor, they have moved that tubing inside to better protect those systems, which seems like a really good idea, and it's surprising that they hadn't done that before. Right. Like I said, I mentioned the shock absorbing system. You can drop from 100 to 300 depending on what model you're wearing. And we did mention the fresh fusion core should give you about 100 years, with the exception of the T-45. In Fallout 4, it's the first time they introduced the maintenance of the cores, right? Because they had that 100-year shelf life on them. All the previous Fallout games are like, if you got power armor, you can just wear it. It's good for 100 years. Nobody's been using it for the last 200, you're fine. Just go. Whereas Fallout 4 is like, fusion cores are degrading. They're not going to last that long anymore, right? At this point, they're over 200 years old. Even if they're not active, they're kind of just like batteries just dying just by sitting there. And so you've got to really work to keep fusion cores in your power armor in Fallout 4.
But there's also a bunch of them. You find them all the time.
You find them all the time. Not in the beginning, right?
Not in the very beginning. But like eventually you're just like, oh look, another fusion core. Another one.
But it really introduces an interesting dynamic because you have in-game armor, but you cannot wear it all the time. And so like the combat armor becomes very popular in Fallout 4 because you can't constantly wear your power armor anymore. It's, whereas in all the other Fallout games, you get your power armor, and that's it. And like, and I always wonder if the idea to give the player power armor at the very beginning of Fallout 4, but then require the constant maintenance of fusion cores, was a reaction to player guides, how to get power armor in the first 10 minutes or whatever, right?
Oh,
and so you'd have players, Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, you do like this little loop and you get power armor and you're like level 3, right? And I almost wonder if it was a reaction to that. It's like, yeah, you got 10 minutes in, you got your power armor. Now you are constantly searching for energy sources to fuel it.
Kind of feels a bit like what they did in the TV show too, right? Like, goes out on his first mission, boom, you got power armor. Oh, but you're crap at it.
So, all right, now we'll talk about the EXC power armor. This is the excavator power armor. So, if you've ever seen 30 Rock, where they talk about the Shrinehart Wig Company, right? Essentially, this was a very successful company way back in like the 1800s, and they just kept buying other companies and buying other companies and buying other companies. But there are corporations like that in existence today. Like we have the Sumner Redstone Company that owns parts of CBS, Viacom, MTV, BET, Paramount Pictures, and MovieTickets.com. They own like huge stakes in all these, because there are companies like the Shrinehart Wig Company that are real and very much do that. So within Fallout, the company we have that is kind of like that is the Garahan Mining Company. So they are able to leverage their wealth and influence to get plans and hire the person who developed the T-45 power armor, but they want to use it for mining because, like I said, it was designed for military labor. So within a very few months, he creates this power armor and they start using it for mining. However, it is not going well. Like the servos are wearing out, rock falls are crushing and destroying the arms. Like it's in power armor. Like I want to compare it to like a broken bone versus a stress fracture. A football player is far more likely to break a bone. A runner is far more likely to get a stress fracture. And that's kind of the difference on how the power armor was reacting to combat versus mining, right? Combat is like football. Very short, very high impact situations. Mining, 12 hours a day, nonstop, minor impacts, and it just wears it down. So for the cost of production, they just weren't working out. So they needed to find a way to make the suits more effective for mining. And so the two solutions they come up with is one, instead of using the polylaminate composite, they would use black titanium. But black titanium was a lot heavier than the composite was. And so then they needed to find a new power source. And eventually they found ultracite. And so,
I feel like you shouldn't call it black titanium if, like, titanium is light. That's what one of the things it's known for.
well, this is a special kind of titanium. That's why they're calling it black titanium.
I get it. But, okay. I just felt counterintuitive.
So
Yeah,
this is an in Fallout world thing, black titanium.
Yeah.
Right. So then they needed ultracite cores to power them, not just regular fusion cores. Eventually, they came out very expensive. However, once these new suits were released into the mines, they set the world record for the most amount of material mined in a single day. They were just behemoths, just unstoppable in the mine, just grinding out the ore.
You said what kind of power source?
Ultracite.
Ultracite. Okay. Recognize that.
So all of this is Fallout 76 stuff. That's where the lore's coming from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But they ended up making very efficient mining machines.
Yes, they were very efficient for that. And like I said, if you pick up a EXC power armor, that is definitely going to give you the best resistance of all the power armor because it's made of that black titanium. However, you don't just need a fusion core, you need an ultracite fusion core. Otherwise, it won't run. So even harder to run them in the apocalypse.
But they're built to take boulders to the face.
Yes, they are built to like have a mountain fall on you and you can walk out of it. You know, it is designed. It is designed for that. Yes. So there are various forms of salvaged power armor across the waste. You'll see raiders who have kind of patched together bits and pieces. You will see the NCR has various forms of salvaged power armor. Sometimes they strip out the servos and just have people wear it like armor if they're beefy enough to handle that. But yes, so that is kind of our world version of power armor, kind of the origins there. We have in just ancient armor, full plate, Panzer armor, all of that going on. And the various pieces you can find out there and then its evolution. So within the show, the ghoul identifies that there is a weakness in the metal, probably just about below the diaphragm, where he shoots some of the Brotherhood of Steel soldiers to kill them. Also, at one point, he uses a knife to leverage out one of the hydraulics hoses from the headpiece. So we do see those two things happen within the TV show.
Just real quick. So, he takes out, like at the end there, he's taking out people in power armor left and right, you know. But he struggled with the first guy, right? The guy who's the power armor. And in the very beginning, they were talking about how he's like, oh, I see you went in with this lining. Right? That it was a special piece of lining. So that adaptation covered that
the problem, the weakness,
flaw that he was
exploiting at the end of the show. Yeah. And like I said, to handle that, he sticks his knife into the connecting hose of the helmet and rips out where those hydraulics are. So, and as we pointed out, the advanced power armor solved that problem as well by putting all the hoses inside the armor, which makes them look like they've got like weird alien heads and stuff, but it hides your hoses. So, and as much as like having studied this, I understand that power armor, but the original power armor helmet just looks so cool. I love it.
And that's like the iconic, right?
Yeah.
Like what they use. It's as close to their logo as it gets. It's their poster
Yes.
boy.
So yeah, it is as close to their logo as you get. Oh, or the little Fallout dude. No.
Yeah, well, the pet boy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So that is power armor. We hope that answers all your questions there. And how Bethesda has tried to stop you from getting it in 10 minutes through a sneaky trick, and just gave it to you and then made it useless. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Let's talk about treasure. So, power armor is kind of the evolution of plate armor. What other armors would you think would be really cool to see evolve into modern day armor now from ancient history? We'll talk about that in the treasure room. Hope you enjoyed this episode. We have learned that many of our fans are only interested in some of the worlds we cover. The podcast feed is just a list and we have no control over that. But if you go to either the Patreon site or YouTube, there are collections and playlists that can easily access all the things you're interested in. On the Patreon site, there are even tags to hunt down even more specific things. Everything that is free in the podcast is still free there. It's just a better organization of the episodes. We have covered D&D, Baldur's Gate, Cyberpunk, Dune, Fallout, the origin of comics, DC and Marvel, Aliens, Predator, Godzilla, King Kong, The Witcher, and more. And if we haven't covered something you love, let us know and we can add it to the list.